Have you ever done indoor cardio to lose fat? Or maybe you're exercising every day. Or you're thinking about starting, or at the very least, you've watched a friend or family member train consistently, yet their belly fat barely changes. If you've found yourself in any of those situations, this video is for you. Because most people, whether they have trained, are training, or are about to start, share the same belief that burning visceral fat requires workouts that are hard, exhausting, and draining. And that belief is exactly why so much effort ends up being wasted. The truth is, the human body does not operate on the harder you suffer, the more fat you burn logic. Especially when it comes to visceral fat, the most dangerous type of fat, stored deep inside the abdomen, surrounding the liver, and other vital organs. Visceral fat is highly metabolically active, and the most effective way to target it is not by pushing the body into stress, but by guiding it into Zone 2, the biological intensity zone where cells prioritize burning fat instead of glucose. In this video, I'll show you how to master Zone 2 indoors. Whether you're using a stationary bike, jumping in place, stepping stairs, or working with very limited space, I've gathered 6 science-based strategies that help keep your metabolism locked into the optimal fat-burning zone without training harder, only training smarter. And stay until the end, because the 6th strategy doesn't just improve visceral fat loss. It also solves the biggest reason most people quit indoor cardio altogether: boredom, while still keeping your body firmly in Zone 2. Part 1. Why Zone 2 is the biological key to burning visceral fat. Most people approach fat loss with a familiar assumption: the harder the workout, the faster the fat disappears. This idea sounds logical, but it ignores a fundamental biological truth. The human body does not burn fat based on how painful exercise feels. It responds to metabolic signals. And visceral fat, the most dangerous type of fat, is especially selective about which signals it obeys. Visceral fat is not stored just beneath the skin. It sits deep inside the abdominal cavity, wrapped around the liver, pancreas, and other vital organs. Because of this location, it is highly metabolically active and constantly communicates with the liver and hormonal systems. When the body is pushed into chronic stress through overly intense, rushed, or exhausting workouts, visceral fat does not readily break down. Instead, it tends to be protected as a survival reserve. This is the core reason why many people perform indoor cardio consistently, yet see little to no change in belly fat. Zone 2 represents a biological paradox. It is a moderate intensity activity range where heart rate rises enough to engage aerobic metabolism, but not so high that it triggers a stress response. In this zone, the body primarily uses oxygen to burn fatty acids rather than relying heavily on glucose. In simple terms, Zone 2 is the state in which the body feels safe enough to release stored fat. More importantly, Zone 2 does more than burn fat during exercise. It trains the mitochondria, the cell's energy factories, to work more efficiently. As mitochondria adapt, the body gradually shifts into a healthier metabolic mode, more flexible, less dependent on sugar, and less prone to storing fat around internal organs. This explains why many long-term observations show that people who maintain steady, moderate-intensity movement often reduce visceral fat more effectively than those who train intensely but inconsistently. The difference is not calorie burn per session, but metabolic learning. Zone 2 is not dramatic. It doesn't feel heroic. But biologically, it is the master key to unlocking visceral fat that has resisted change for years. Part 2. What Zone 2 is and how to recognize it. Using biological signals, no devices needed. Zone 2 is not a number on a watch or a rigid formula. Biologically, Zone 2 is a moderate intensity range where the body feels challenged but not threatened. It is the delicate boundary between movement that improves metabolism and movement that triggers a stress response. The simplest way to identify Zone 2 is through bodily sensation. In Zone 2, you can speak in short phrases. Not long conversations, but enough to answer a question without gasping for air. Breathing becomes deeper than normal, yet remains smooth and controlled. You are not chasing oxygen. One of the most reliable biological signals is nasal breathing. When intensity stays within Zone 2, many people can breathe through the nose entirely, or at least alternate between nasal and gentle mouth breathing. The moment you are forced into rapid mouth breathing, you have likely crossed into Zone 3. Another key signal is a gentle warmth in the body, especially around the torso, without excessive sweating. This is not the sharp heat of high-intensity exercise, but a steady rise in temperature as fat oxidation increases. Most importantly, Zone 2 feels sustainable. You sense that you could maintain this pace for a long time without sudden energy collapse. Zone 2's power over visceral fat lies in its hormonal environment. When you move within this zone, cortisol remains relatively low, and the nervous system stays calm. In this state, the body is willing to release stored fat, including visceral fat, for fuel. When intensity creeps higher into Zone 3, glucose becomes the preferred energy source, and deep fat is largely spared. The most common mistake is assuming that slightly faster is always better. In reality, even a small increase in pace can push you out of Zone 2. And while that may feel more intense, it often reduces the very metabolic effect needed to target visceral fat. Part 3. 6 Indoor Zone. 2 exercises that target visceral fat. One of the biggest misconceptions about Zone 2 is that it only applies to outdoor walking or light jogging. In reality, Zone 2 is not location dependent. It is defined by biological intensity. If the intensity is right, the same visceral fat-burning mechanisms activate, even indoors. The easiest exercise to control is the stationary bike. It allows precise adjustment of intensity. Use light resistance and maintain a steady cadence. Keep your shoulders relaxed and your grip loose. When the upper body stays calm and breathing remains smooth, heart rate naturally settles into Zone 2, where visceral fat mobilization begins. Next is slow, controlled jumping jacks. Although often seen as high intensity, jumping jacks become an effective aerobic tool when slowed down. Avoid explosive bouncing. Use both arms and legs to distribute effort evenly, keeping the movement fluid. If breathlessness appears quickly, the tempo is too fast. For small spaces, invisible rope skipping works remarkably well. No actual rope is needed. Jump low, land softly, and keep the rhythm consistent. These small, repetitive movements maintain steady oxygen demand, which supports fat oxidation. If joints are sensitive, alternate feet to reduce impact. Stair-stepping or using a low platform is metabolically powerful when done correctly. The key is low height and controlled pace. Stepping too high or too fast shifts the body toward glycolytic energy use, pulling you out of Zone 2 without obvious warning. A joint-friendly yet effective option is slow high knee marching. Unlike HIIT-style high knees, this version emphasizes rhythm over height. Maintain upright posture, relaxed shoulders, and gentle foot placement. It's ideal for beginners or those with joint limitations. Finally, to combat boredom, use a Zone 2 mini circuit. Rotate through slow squats, marching in place, and side steps. Each movement lasts 1-2 minutes, transitioning smoothly without sudden intensity spikes. This keeps heart rate stable, reduces local fatigue, and maintains Zone 2 while keeping the mind engaged. Part 4. Duration, frequency, and mistakes that sabotage results. One of the most common questions is, how long do I need to walk for visceral fat to decrease? The scientific answer is simpler than most people expect. 30 minutes per session is already effective, as long as you stay in true Zone 2. The real driver of change is not extreme session length, but weekly volume and consistency. Research shows that 150 to 210 minutes of Zone 2 per week leads to clear improvements in visceral fat, insulin sensitivity, and mitochondrial function. Increasing total time to around 300 minutes per week produces even stronger effects, especially for long-standing abdominal fat. The body does not respond to isolated effort. It responds to repeated, cumulative signals over time. 3 consistent sessions per week outperform a single long but irregular workout. The most common mistake is constantly changing pace. Speeding up and slowing down causes heart rate fluctuations that prevent the body from staying in the fat oxidation zone long enough to mobilize visceral fat. The second mistake is pushing too hard. Feeling good and increasing intensity often pushes the body into Zone 3, where glucose becomes the dominant fuel again. The third mistake is random training. Inconsistent sessions prevent mitochondrial adaptation, so progress never compounds. To enhance results, 2 biological strategies stand out. First, walking before meals or when glycogen stores are lower naturally shifts metabolism toward fat oxidation. Second, use breathing as an intensity anchor. Smooth, controlled breathing is one of the most reliable indicators that you are still in Zone 2. When breathing stays steady and unforced, your physiology remains in the optimal state for visceral fat reduction, no devices required, just awareness and consistency. Part 5. Conclusion. The most important thing to take away from this video is not a new exercise or a more complex training plan. It's a new understanding of how your body actually works. Zone 2 is not a method to force fat loss. It is the biological language the human body has used for millions of years to regulate itself, repair itself, and optimize energy use. When you are in Zone 2, your body is not in fight mode. It is not stressed, alarmed, or operating under survival pressure. Instead, it receives a very clear signal. The environment is safe. Energy is stable. Deep reserves can be accessed. Only in this state does visceral fat, the type closely linked to stress, inflammation, and metabolic dysfunction, begin to release. Most people fail not because they lack discipline or motivation, but because they are speaking the wrong language to their body. They shout through intensity, exhaustion, and cortisol, while the body responds to calm, rhythmic, and repeatable signals. Zone 2 is where movement and biology meet, where effort aligns with safety rather than stress. Once you understand this, exercise stops being a battle. It becomes a dialogue. You don't need to push harder. You need to move in harmony with your biology. Not more willpower, but more precision. And when Zone 2 becomes a natural part of your daily rhythm, consistent, unforced visceral fat doesn't just decrease. Your body begins functioning the way it was designed to. Zone 2 does not promise overnight transformation, but it offers something far more valuable: a metabolic system that listens, adapts, and repairs itself over time. And that is the true foundation of lasting health.